Okay, as promised, we will going to look into this lecture, elections in PNG. The discussion would be around the theme here, assessing assessing the shift to limited preferential voting in 2017 or 2007 rather, national election in Papua New Guinea. So this is the theme for this lecture here. Now the objectives are as follows. The objectives of this lecture is to provide an overview of the shift to limited preferential voting in 2007 national election in Papua New Guinea and to analyze its impact on the electoral outcome. More importantly, our titular questions for this week would be what are the reasons behind the decision to switch to limited preferential voting? How did voters respond to the new LPV system in 2007 national election? And what impact did LPV have on the political landscape of Papua New Guinea? Okay, as a way of introduction, so before I start with anything, let me just give a background on how this electoral or the LPV system came about. So the Morota government, of 1999 to 2002 amended the organic law on the national and local level government election to replace the existing first past the post voting system to one of what we know now, limited voting system or the LPV, as part of the package of the economic and political reforms during that time. Now these changes, before we go on talking about the actual changes, LPV in itself, what is the argument for LPV? Now taking a step back and looking at the scholarly and academic literatures, the argument by Donald Horowitz here, who states that the rationale behind introducing an alternative voting system is to address challenges posed by ethnically divided societies, and that is where Papua New Guinea is. So Horowitz argued that the alternative voting system is conducive for ethnically divided society or divisive ethnic issues. Now the AV advocates for AV indicated that alternative vote in such societies, divided societies, is important for its potential to mitigate ethnic conflict. And that alternate vote, also known as preferential voting, allows voters to rank candidates. Rank candidates in order of preference, promoting inclusivity and reducing the winner-takes-all nature of the voting system. Further on, by giving the voters more choices and allowing for possibility of consensus candidates, the alternative vote aims to foster greater representation and stability in ethnically divided societies. So what do we learn here? Well, the argument by Horowitz noted that the AV electoral system, or LPV, is intended for ethnically divided society. That's number one. Secondly, the alternative vote or preferential voting allows voters to rank candidates, and that's important because by ranking of candidates, this allows the system itself to mitigate any potential ethnic or issues or conflicts. So the overall story about this electoral system is that it tries to foster greater representation and participation in an ethnically divided society like Papua New Guinea. So this is a sample of what we have here, LPV system, where you have 1, 2, 3. Remember these three preferences here. These preferences here is equals to one vote. So this is how preferences are shared, and this is an example that I got from the Department of Education website. So for example, here we have as 6 candidates contesting for election. We have Davis, Boki, Isaiah, Susan, Alice, and Steve. Now, what happens is after the count, the number 1 votes are counted. David scored 100, Boki scored 120, Isaiah scored 140, Susan scored 250, Alice scored 180, Steve scored 210. Now, the idea of LPV is that you have to reach 50 plus 1 votes to win. So here, let's say 6 candidates, if there are 1,000 voters, one must get above 500 votes, so that constitute 50 plus 1. So if no one has reached the majority, if Davis, 1,000 votes, he needs 500 to win. The first count he did not reach the majority. What happens is that the candidate who has the lowest votes is eliminated, and their second choice votes are distributed to the other candidates. Who is the lowest candidate here? Davis, Boku, Isaiah, Susan, Alice, and Steve. Most probably it would be Isaiah. So Isaiah would be the first to be eliminated. When Isaiah is eliminated, the second preference from Isaiah is distributed amongst this candidate here. So once again, there is no absolute majority. Candidate who has the lowest votes is eliminated, and second choice votes are distributed to the other candidates. They do this until they reach 500 plus 1. And in here the winner gets to represent the constituency on the winning majority of over half of the eligible voting population. So that's basically how so in that process here, Horowitz argued that this would help mitigate and address ethnically divided society or issues. Now the background, we're talking about the mechanics of LPV, and now let's look at the background. So the aim was to reduce malpractices. The LPV was aimed at reducing malpractices such as voting intimidation, ethnic voting, and discouraging outsiders from campaigning in candidates' home area, which often resulted in confrontational and violent behaviors. So all this talks about the complication of ethnic fragmented society Papua New Guinea is. So LPV was expected to lead to be more accommodative behavior, partly through the preference swapping and alliances. So let's say if I have about 3 preferences, and most probably my ethnic people or tribesmen will vote, would give me the first preference. However, I need 50 plus 1, so I will look to the other candidate on the other side and make an alliance with the candidate. I'll tell him, look, you give me well, let's swap preference. I'll give you my supporter base second preference to you, and then you give me your supporter base second preference to me. In that way, we're providing this environment for accommodative behavior, and this in itself will try to mitigate conflicts. So to cut the story short, this is a good, the argument is that it will reduce violence in election. Violence is typically associated with every Papua New Guinean election, so that was supposed to reduce violence. Now, this is an important area, and then probably that's the one that that's the one that sort of grabs the attention of the whole system itself. Now, under the first past the post electoral system and the alternative or the plurality system that we are using, majoritarian system, a member of parliament an elected member of parliament must ensure in an ideally let's say in an ideally case, a typical case of this electoral system that is used, that most MPs must win over majority population in order to secure a seat in parliament. Now that has not been the case here, and let's look through this table here. So the idea is that this electoral system is supposed to provide for majoritarian representation. However, that did not eventuate, according to this table here by late Dr. Henry Okore. Now you look at this table, 60 plus 1. From 1977, okay, 8%, okay, 8% of the votes says won. And then by 2002, 0. That means that candidates are not winning on a majority and over 60 plus 1. Now let's see, 50 plus 50 to 59, 10, and you see the decline. Now let's look at here, 10 to 19% of number of seats. 1977, 10%, 44% in 2002. So this is a telling figure that candidates are winning offices not on the majority vote shares. Now that sort of contradicts this idea of majoritarian representation. In a majoritarian representation, candidates must win over 50% of the votes. That is not the case for Papua New Guinea. And that is the reason why the LPV was to manage and address that. Okay, so the 50 plus 1 LPV votes, okay, was to ensure this issue that was brought up under the first past the post electoral system. Now let's look at what happened in 2007. Well, in 2007 there was a confidence in the LPV system. Well, candidates felt more free to move around the electorate without harassment, okay, with rival candidates. LPV gave electors more choice, particularly significant in places where voters, especially women, were under pressure. So this, the first, let's say, rollout of LPV in 2007 was ideally, okay, it started off in a promising start. So by 2007, LPV offered more choices to this, okay, was frequently compromised by lack of general secret ballot. Okay, you have 1, 2, and 3. Campaigning was generally more accommodative and less violent, though this may have been due to more extensive security operation than to a new voting system. Mandates increase as to be expected of the new electoral arithmetic. Okay, though it remains to be seen whether these will yield better MPs. Otherwise, there was a slight evidence that LPV had benefited women and little support the belief that it would reduce the number of candidates or strengthen political parties. So in 2007, the system itself went on a promising start. However, it was after 2007, 2012, 17, and 2022, let's say, the old issues of the old electoral system started to come in. Now, there are other arguments, and I will make mention of one such argument here, that LPV was supposed to address the issue of violence. Well, it did not. From 2012, 2007 to 2022, the increase in violence and burning of ballot papers is not indicative of the LPV system at work here. Corruption itself, malpractices that has been rampant after 2007. Now, it's not a good telling of the system itself. But rather than talking about that, let's look at some success and failures. And I think two important success in the sense that we can say or look at success in terms of improvement. So LPV system has promoted greater representation of diverse groups in parliament. Now that is a good indicator here that we have seen that um, under LPV we have 3 women voted in and voted out in 2017, but however 2022 retained 2 women. That's a good indication of the LPV system, a greater representation. Secondly, the LPV system has allowed voters to express their preference more fully, leading to a more nuanced understanding of voter preferences. I'll indicate a case here in 2017 election for Pangu Party. Pangu Party won 9 of the 11 seats in Morobe, and that is where I think Terence Wood in his paper, and I can't quite remember the title of that paper, he has mentioned in that paper that there is evidence of protest votes, okay, towards PNC, the People's National Congress, and that protest votes can only be accommodated under an LPV or the alternate voting system and not the FPTP. So that is a strong indication that LPV is making an improvement in that regard of the political party development. Let's carry on. Now, failures. We can say failures, look at failures in terms of, okay, at success we look at it in terms of improvement, we look at failures in terms of, let's say, weakness. And so if we talk about weakness, then we sort of allow flexibility and the room for improvement. Now it happens here that candidates, okay, tend to show little understanding of the LPV system, okay, and that experience in 2007 and also after 2007 we had a lot of ballot paper, wastage of ballot papers, disqualification of votes, that is due to people's voters understanding of the voting process itself and the mechanics of filling up a ballot paper. Okay, voter turnout has remained high, and with election, candidate members have tended to increase, resulting in MPs being elected with small mandates. Okay, so the idea of, although 50% is being reached, 50 plus 1, okay, not a lot of candidates tend to be elected due to the majority vote shares. Despite having that cutoff mark of 50 plus 1, there are several instances where candidates won on a low vote winning share, and that is an indication of the dire need to fix this issue here. And I don't know, and I'm not looking at the change of system, but it's probably aimed at the administering of that system. Now, the 2017 election was described as the worst in Papua New Guinea's history, with widespread violence, failed expectation, election declared in 6 electorates. Yep, violence increased for that matter. Yep, the LPV system has not achieved its purpose of mitigating ethnic conflict, and that is true. In this election, we have banning of ballot boxes in Makam, okay, in the coastal region where you normally don't see this happening. We have an increase of prolonged ethnic violence in the islands region, in particular Yanga province. There hasn't been any stability. So the argument that it was supposed to address these issues here, he did not did not address these issues, and that sort of tainted the image of this new electoral system. Now, let's look at the conclusion here. What I want to get across here is that there's 2 points here. LPV electoral system was to promote cooperation and open up preferences outside of the ethnic and tribal allegiance. Well, it did, and the positive outcome was in 2017 election for the benefit of the Pangu party. Apart from that, violence continued. People continued to the election tend to go back to the default setting. That's probably a more not an institutional issue, but a governance issue of the system itself. Okay, issues of accountability, transparency, security are all packed up in this governance issue, and not entirely the institutional issue. So what I'm saying is that the system itself, okay, is the system itself cannot be blamed for, okay, the setbacks that is happening in election. Okay, if you look at the elections in Papua New Guinea, issues tend to be more focused, or the negative, let's say, vibe issues coming out of the elections are related to the governance issues of accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. Now, the mechanics behind LPV was to address the low voter winning percentage. It did, after 2002, voter winning percentage jumped up to about 33%. However, that is not enough if we are to, if you want the system to achieve, if you want the system to achieve if you want the system to achieve its intended purposes. Okay, with that, this concludes the lecture, okay, for today.